and girls, children of all ages. The Dirty Man Room Show proudly brings you Cards Subject to Change with Hassel, where we tackle the what-ifs of professional wrestling. And this week we got one of the biggest what-ifs that was almost a what happened. We are going to tackle what if Bret, the Hitman Hart, had went to WCW in 1992. Now, I know a lot of you people are probably thinking, Hassel, this would not have happened. This almost happened. In 92, WCW was putting on by far the superior wrestling matches. Now, they did not have the production value that Vince and Kevin Dunn was throwing into the WWF. Let's just face it. That is still something that even Tony Khan struggles with today, because that is just, they have developed just production value-wise beauty, and it's been that way very much since the 80s. They've done a tremendous job on that, and this is where WCW failed in a lot of ways. It was a step up from what NWA was in the 80s, but it was not nowhere near the production value the WWF had. However, from about 1990 to, I would say, 94, your superior wrestling matches, they were going on right there. Rick Rude, when he jumped to WCW, he had some of the greatest matches of his career over there during this time period. And a purist like Bret Hitman Hart, so it's just a no-brainer for him. And for those that don't know, Bret did explore this option, and Bret almost went. If it were not for a clause in his contract, he would have. So, in 1992, during his first run as Intercontinental Champion, mere days before dropping the title to the Mountie, that's right, the Mountie people, Bret was starting to fear where his future may lie. He knew he was going to drop the title. He did not know, however, that he would regain the title at WrestleMania from Roddy Piper. He did not know that later in that following year, the same year, he would get the first of 5 WWF championships. However, he did know that former Intercontinental champions like Tito Santana, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat were made into El Matadors and Dragons and just silly characters. And early in the 80s, they did try to turn Bret into a cowboy. So Bret did fear for this right here. So he did reach out to WCW, and he explored his options. They also made him a tremendous offer that he was wanting to take. However, due to a clause in his contract that he did not know about, you had to give 90 days written notice before your contract expired. Bret did not realize this. His contract auto-renewed. The rest is history. But what if? What if his contract had not auto-renewed? What if Bret Hart had jumped ship during WCW during this time? Now, let's face it, Bret was not the world champion that he went on to be when he would be going to WCW. However, he was already one hell of a seasoned ring technician. He did not have the mic skills, but let's face it, in WCW, you didn't have to have all that. It wasn't all about the show. It was bell to bell. And people like JR, who was still going by Jim Ross at the time, who were your commentators, Tony Schiavone, they could get Bret through a good interview. So, we're going to go with that right there. So, we're going to have Bret drop the title to the Mountie, much like he did in regular continuity. And then he's going to make his jump. So on January 21st, 1992, at the Clash of Champions, we got DDP versus a mystery opponent. Now, DDP was in his early stages of getting into the ring. He had just transitioned from manager over. He was still kind of managing the Diamond Stud and Vinny Vegas during this time. However, he was starting to get in the ring. And early DDP, he was to Diamond Dallas, was not that good. He put the work in, though, people. He got there. When none other than Bret Hitman Hart comes through the curtain, Jim Ross would go, "Oh my God, Tony, that is former Intercontinental Champion and Tag Champ Bret Hart from the legendary Hart family. Bret Hart wins over DDP with the sharp shooter. How better way to make your debut? We got Tony Schiavone interviewing Bret Hart post-match. Bret Hart goes, WCW, the Hitman has arrived, and I got gold in my crosshairs. So everybody with a championship, you've been warned. The excellence of execution is here. On WCW Saturday night, people, back then we didn't have primetime wrestling. You didn't have wrestling every day of the week. It was pretty much a Saturday and Sunday deal. Now, they dominated the weekends because their demos were different back then. Their demos were, you know, your stay-at-home parents, grandparents, and then the youngsters, the middle-aged that wound up making the Attitude Era. They wasn't being targeted just yet. So, on WCW Saturday night, we get a quick match between Bret Hart and Terrence Taylor of the York Foundation. Bret picks up the win with the sharpshooter, and in a post-match interview, TV champion stunning Steve Austin would Paul E. Dangerously come out to confront Hart. Hart challenges Austin to a title match at Super Brawl 2. At Super Brawl 2, February 29th, 1992, we got WCW television champion stunning Steve Austin with Paul E. Dangerously versus Bret the Hitman Hart. We get a great matchup as Austin was the great chicken shit heel back then. Dangerously attempts to clock Hart with the phone. He had this huge cell phone back in the early 90s. It was awesome, people. He would attempt to clock him with it when Bret Hart ducks and Paul would blast Austin. We get a roll up for the 1, 2, 3, and new World Television Champion, Bret Hitman Hart. Man, we didn't have the Fink there, but we did have David Penzer. So on WCW Saturday night, new NWA television champion, Bret the Hitman Hart. And I get it, people. It's confusion. It's WCW, but the NWA still had ties for some of this year, and they hadn't rebranded the television championship just yet. They had barely rebranded their world title as Ric Flair was jump ship and with the world title to the WWF, them creating their own title. And this is where they start to, you know, break ties a little bit more. But we still had NWA tag titles. We still had the NWA television championship. The U.S. champion, I think, by that point was a WCW title, but we'll get there, folks. Bret Hart with Jesse the Body Ventura, and he's telling him that he is a fighting champion and will defend his title on TV every single week. Over the next few weeks, Bret Hart has successful defenses against Diamond Dallas Page. Vinny Vegas, you guys may know him as Boop Diesel, or a little bit of a Kevin Nash there, NWO aficionado, but he's still Vinny Vegas at the time. We get Cactus Jack, and he has a banger against none other than beautiful Bobby Eaton, a member of the Dangerous Alliance. The Dangerous Alliance is a vastly underrated stable from this era right here. I would love to have that talent with Paulie Dangerously versus a Paul Heyman bloodline. That would be a great feud. WCW main event. Now, this was the Sunday 6:05 show. It was typically only an hour, but it was a great show. We get TV champion Bret Hart versus the Diamond Stud. Hey, Chico, you know who he is. Hart brings out the best in the Stud, a.k.a. Scott Hall. They have a really good matchup. Bret picks up the win with a sharpshooter, but he really elevates Stud. After the match, Austin and the Dangerous Alliance attack Hart in a beatdown when Sting, Nikita Koloff, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, and the Natural Dustin Rhodes, they make the save. The next week on WCW Saturday night, it is announced that at Wrestle War, it will be Sting's squadron of Sting, Bret Hart, Nikita Koloff, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, and Dustin Rhodes versus the Dangerous Alliance. Rick Rude, Steve Austin, Arn Anderson, Larry Zbyszko, the living legend, and beautiful Bobby in a War Games match. That's right, people. War Games. That was a WCW. For those of you that don't know, go back and do your homework. On WCW, the Saturday night before War Games, we get a Austin versus Hart rematch for the NWS, the newly crowned WCW World Television Champion. The belt had just transitioned over. Now, this is a title that does not get enough recognition. During that era right there, they had a really cool look for the television champion. It wasn't the cruiserweight title that they turned into the TV title that we know from the mid to late 90s. During this era right here, he was a Reggie Parks belt. It looked really, really good. Go and investigate that one right there. Only a handful of champions got to wear it during this time, but nice looking title. And Bret is going to be the first to wear it to the ring. Due to outside interference from Paulie and Rude, Austin would regain the title with the stun gun finisher. That's right, people. He wasn't using the Stone Cold Stunner. It was the stun gun, and it was a top rope deal. At Wrestle War, May 17th, 1992, War Games. We get Sting Squadron versus the Dangerous Alliance. Bret Hart kicks off for the Sting Squadron. Austin kicks off for the Dangerous Alliance. We get Austin trying to use the double ring and stall and run and hide until he can get the two-man advantage as the Dangerous Alliance has the upper hand. Bret Hart finally catches him and begins to open a can of whoop-ass on Stunning Steve. Then down comes Rick Rude, and he and Austin work over Hart. Over the next few minutes, the WCW champion Sting comes out for the save. Now, Sting had just beat Lex Luger, who was on his way out the door at the pay-per-view just prior, and Luger goes off to the WWF to become the narcissist, and he does I think he does the bodybuilding federation for a year before he becomes the narcissist, and then, the All-American and whatnot. But he had just become the new champion the month before. I apologize for not touching on that. One-on-one, both teams, they enter the ring until all men are there. Now the match beyond begins. We get a great match. With the finish comes with Bret Hart locks Austin in the sharpshooter and Sting locks Rude in the scorpion for the double submission. WCW Saturday night, Bret Hart versus Arn Anderson, the Enforcer. Fun old school matchup right here. Bret got the win via pinfall. Afterwards, Austin and Bobby Eaton attack Hart until Koloff and Steamboat make the save, setting up a 6-man tag match at Beach Blast. Beach Blast, June 20th, 1992. We get a 6-man tag team match with Nikita picking up the win for his team with the Russian sickle on beautiful Bobby. People, Nikita Koloff does not get enough credit for what a badass he was in the mid to late 80s into the early 90s. And injuries just unfortunately took him out. He had a tough go with his wife, setting some of his prime out to take care of his cancer-ridden wife. So we're going to show Nikita some love in this right here. Leading into the Great American Bash, we get a tag team title tournament for the vacant NWA Tag Team Championships. Bret and Nikita become a tag team and they advance. At the Great American Bash in the quarterfinals, Bret and Nikita versus Rick Rude and Steve Austin. The heels take our baby faces to the limit. However, Bret picks up the win on Rude after nailing a pile driver with him to advance. In the semifinals, we get Bret and Koloff versus Steamboat and Barry Windham. Now, this was something WCW was really good at. They made the face versus faces matchups work, especially in stuff like this. We get a solid matchup with Koloff pinning Windham. In the finals for the NWA World Tag Team Championships, Bret Hart and the Russian Nightmare Nikita Koloff versus WCW Tag Champs Terry Bam Bam Gordy and Dr. Death Steve Williams. These guys, man, these were beasts. They were fresh out of a run in Japan. They were bad asses. So we get a Japanese strong style match with Gordy and Williams looking fucking amazing. They look for the finisher on Koloff and Hart, but Bret Hart does a bit of selling for the tag, does a good bit of selling for the tag team. Bret finally makes the hot tag to Nikita, who cleans house, sickles Gordy out of the ring, while Bret ties up Dr. Death. 1, 2, 3, and new NWA World Tag Team Champions, Bret Hitman Hart and the Russian Nightmare Nikita Koloff. We got the new NWA Tag Team Champions, and they dominate the tag division weekly throughout the summer. On WCW Saturday night in October, Bret Hart wins a Battle Royal for the WCW World Title opportunity against champion Ron Simmons. That's right, people. Ron Simmons still gets the win over Vader, still becomes our first African-American world champion. However, he gets the win by lastly eliminating Nikita Koloff. As Bret celebrates, Koloff is fuming and jumps back in the ring and gets in Hart's face. Bret reminds him that it's every man for himself in a battle royal and extends his hand. Koloff still looks pissed, but he hugs Bret and raises Bret's hand to celebrate. At Halloween Havoc, October 25th, 1992, we get Nikita Koloff losing in of a U.S. title matchup against ravishing Rick Rude. Now, in our real continuity, this match, Rude had to fight twice in the same night. So he substituted Vader out and let Vader defend his United States Championship. Vader injured Koloff in real life during this, and then Koloff kind of petered off after that. However, Rude is going to have to defend against Koloff. Koloff is not going to get injured, and Rude is still going to get the win, though. But he gets the win when the Dangerous Alliance bash Koloff over the head with the cell phone. WCW World Champion Ron Simmons versus Bret Hitman Hart. We get a great 4-star matchup here. The crowd is firmly behind Hart. Bret works the knee over the whole matchup while Ron Simmons is still a powerhouse and hits some power moves on Hart for a great back and forth matchup. Eventually, Bret locks in the sharpshooter to pick up the win and become the new WCW champion. Bret Hitman Hart shakes Ron Simmons' hand in a good show of class afterwards. Both men celebrate in the ring and pass the torch to Hart for his first world title. So he gets his first world title around the same time in WCW. He would have got it in the WWF. And that WCW World Championship, I'll put a graphic up right here, vastly underrated. It was a Reggie Parks deal. He did borrow some elements from the Winged Eagle, but this is a really great looking title. It's one I kind of wish would have stuck around a little longer. Don't get enough love, but it's hard to compete with the big gold when it returns. WCW Saturday night, we get new WCW champion Bret Hart. He's been interviewed by Jim Ross. Bret states that he is honored to carry on the great legacy of WCW champions like Ric Flair, Sting, Dusty Rhodes. He thanks Ron Simmons for a great match and the opportunity and credits his title reign as historic. Then the other half of the tag team champions, Nikita Koloff, comes out. Congratulations, champ. All the cards fell in your favor last night, I see. But where was my tag partner when I needed you last night? When I was cheated out of the United States title? Bret Hart. I'm sorry, Nikita, I got caught up in preparing for my own matchup. You know I got your back, though. We've beat everyone as tag team champions, and if you want me in your corner for a rematch with Rude, I'm there. WCW tag champions come out, Terry Gordy and Dr. Death, Steve Williams. They walk out and say, hey, lovebirds, you ducked and dodged us, but we want a shot at those tag titles tonight. We want to become the unified champions. Koloff, who is pissed off, says, tonight. NWA Tag Champions versus WCW Tag Champs. I'm going to be honest, as a kid, this kind of confused me a little bit, but now I get it because we get title unifications all the time, right? And 2 sets of belts, etc., etc. Back then, though, I just really loved that new WCW tag title. That's my favorite for WCW. So I just wanted them to have those. But, hey, I can respect it now. We get Koloff and Williams to start the match, and Nikita is a house of fire. Bret tags in and is eventually overpowered by Dr. Death and Bam Bam Gordy. As they work him over for some time, Bret finally breaks free and attempts a tag for Nikita to walk away. Oh no, Bret Hart is confused. Gordy hits his finisher for the win and the unified tag titles. On WCW main event the next night, Eric Bischoff interviews Nikita Koloff and he asks him why he turned his back on Bret last night. He said, "I carry our team for months. In a Halloween Havoc, Hitman, you didn't have my back. The Russian Nightmare only worries about Nikita now. Uncle Ivan always told me not to trust, and this is why. Hart, I come for you and your gold." He is going to fully go back to embracing his evil Russian gimmick, and he was like a beast back then. Swole as fuck, guys. At Clash of Champions, we get Sting and Bret Hart versus Nikita Koloff and Vader. Vader did not get enough love during this time. Or his run didn't. It was amazing. The champion and Sting make a great team. Vader and Koloff, they try to isolate Bret with their power game, as Bret was a superior one in the selling game. Harley Race, he distracts Sting with a few times and keeps the tag from happening. Bret and Vader go at it until Bret makes a hot tag to Sting. Sting is on fire. Koloff tags in as Vader is almost knocked out by Sting. Bret tags in and he and Sting hit the heart attack on Nikita. 1, 2, 3. Sting and the Hitman pick up the upset win. And that's right, people. We're going to call it an upset because these two heels were beasts back then. We get a great build to Starrcade where we get Nikita Koloff is announced as moving forward. He will be having Harley Race as his manager. Harley was a great heel manager during this time. Starrcade, December 1992. WCW champion Bret Hitman Hart versus the Russian Nightmare Nikita Koloff with Harley Race. The crowd pops when Bret makes his entrance. We get a great entrance and stare down between Hart and Koloff. Great back and forth matchup with Bret fighting from underneath most of the match. Hart starts his comeback when Race draws his attention. Then Koloff nails the Russian sickle on Bret Hart. 1, 2, 3. And new WCW champion, the Russian Nightmare, Nikita Koloff. That's right, people. I told you we was going to give Nikita some love tonight. Back then, champions, they didn't get rematches immediately. You had to build your way back. You had to fight back. We didn't get all these like series of matches where you had 3 or 4 of them months in a row. They moved on to the next contender. Bret moves into a short feud with U.S. champion Ravishing Rick Rude. And if you don't know, Rick was in the middle of an historic United States Championship run that is unequaled even today. He is like the longest reigning WCW United States champion of all time. I think Ambrose might have beat his record in the WWF, but we're not counting that because that belt just looked like shit back then. It still kind of does. On an episode of WCW Saturday Night, we get U.S. title match versus Rick Rude versus Bret the Hitman Hart. We get a fantastic showing just how great Rude and Hart were in the ring. Now, Rude was a great chicken shit heel and seller back then. Hart locks Rude into the sharpshooter when out of nowhere, NWA champion, the Great Muta, nails a shining wizard, KOing Hart, allowing the DQ and Ravishing Rick Rude to retain the title. Rick did not mind winning with a DQ, buddy. This sets up the Great Muta versus Hart feud. This comes to a head at Super Brawl 3 in February for Bret's first year in WCW. But it's going to be for the NWA Championship. Now, the big gold had just been returned, but for some reason it didn't return to WCW immediately. It went to New Japan, and they done their thing there. Chono was the first champion. He won a tournament for it. And then in regular continuity, the Great Muta won it from Chono afterwards, who would go on to drop it to Barry Windham. But instead, we're going to have Muta go into a feud with Bret Hart for the title. It makes more sense to me. We We're going to have at Super Bowl 3, NWA champion Muta making a grand entrance, followed by Bret Hitman Hart blowing the roof off the place. We didn't get the technical matchup that you would expect, but we get a war. Muta is busted open and is a bloody mess. Bret picks up the win via the submission, becoming the new NWA World Champion. Now, it would go on to become the International Championship until it was finally merged together just before Hogan makes his debut in WCW, setting up what we get later. Now, the recently returned Ric Flair was on hand this night, and he would crown Bret Hart the champion, putting the belt around Bret's waist. So with Bret just winning the NWA/International World Championship from the Great Muta, we're going to move into what would happen, and this did actually happen, people. Jim the Anvil Neidhart makes his debut on WCW Saturday night. Now, this actually happened. Jim did debut in '93 with WCW, as does the British Bulldog later in the same year. He and Bret would reform the Hart Foundation. Well, I could easily see these two going on some tag team championships runs there, and as cool as that will be, we're going to hold off on that right there. But they are going to have each other's backs going into the next few months. Bret has a solid run as NWA champion with wins over Muta, Rick Rude, Barry Windham, and stunning Steve Austin, who will get back into the fray. Now, Windham was really still good at this time. He started putting on a little weight, but he still had some great matches in him. We get Hart and Flair, who begin to feud over the title that summer there with a match at Beach Blast. 5-star match, classic, where Bret secures the win over Ric Flair. After the match, Jesse the Body would question Flair about losing, who at the time was still a good guy. Now, Flair, when he returned, he became a face for a while. It just didn't make sense in WCW, but it's what it happened. At Halloween Havoc, however, we will get Ric Flair fighting his way back into an NWA title matchup. And that's several months later, so he had time to fight back, people, with Bret Hart. Another great matchup between these icons. Fifi, however, distracts the ref as Flair kicks Bret in the nuts, where down comes the Anvil. Neidhart shocks the world, however, with a running power slam on Bret Hart for Ric Flair to win the NWA Championship. The two laugh and celebrate in the ring together as the Anvil has just joined up with the Nature Boy, Ric Flair. Over the next few weeks, we get Bret battling the Anvil and Flair weekly alone. Then none other than the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith. He makes his debut on Saturday night for he and Bret to kind of even the odds there. Bret and Bulldog redeem the Hitman in the coming weeks. Now, we all know what goes on shortly thereafter, as we get Hulk Hogan. How does the Warrior say? Hulk Hogan. He debuts in spring of 1994. And his initial beginning, it stays the same there. He goes on to defeat the unified champion Ric Flair, getting the WCW championship that had just been unified with the NWA title, etc., etc. Macho Man still follows him. But instead of getting the Dungeon of Doom crap we got, now the Giant was a shining moment, Luger being with him, that was pretty cool. But instead of getting that there, we're going to wind up setting up towards the end of 94 a Bret Hart versus Hulk Hogan feud. Now, we were supposed to have got this at SummerSlam the year before in real life, but Hogan didn't feel Bret was ready. Bret's ready now. Hogan, even with his creative control, he goes with it. It's going to work for him, brother. Bret pulls a solid match out of the Hulkster, because back then Hulk really could work when he wanted to. Look at Japan, Hogan. I know we've touched on this before. Don't sleep on it, people. Both men shine in this one right here. Now, this is still a Hogan-era WCW, so the Butcher does get involved, costing Hogan the title because he couldn't lose any damn thing clean back then, as the Hitman pins to regain the WCW title. Now, he would go on to reign for several months until he goes into a feud on May 21st at Slamboree with none other than the Macho Man Randy Savage. Yeah, we did not get enough matches with Bret Hart and Randy Savage. These two could have been gold, people. However, the Macho Man is going to end Bret Hart's second reign as WCW champion, and, well, I guess technically it'd be his third reign as world champion within WCW, but his second WCW championship reign. He is going to end his reign winning the title from Bret, and Bret will then make his return to the WWF at SummerSlam 1995. Now, you can just speculate where SummerSlam 95, especially if Bret was not in the mix, the WWF at the time, they were struggling. Diesel's champion. Shawn's still a bad guy. You got Razor over there, so Razor would obviously be a top face without Bret in the mix over there, which he still was. But without Bret in the mix, he would probably right up there with Diesel. So Bret, you throw Bret into there, it's easily seeable, especially as a three-time world champion at this point. Vince would go with Bret and say thank you for coming back, and he would get several WWF championships moving forward. But you drop some comments below. Let me know what you think. Let me know how you think Bret's run would have went upon returning to the WWF. Drop some comments below also and let me know, do you agree, you disagree with the things I come up with here? Because that's what we do here. I like to get you guys feedback. And well, I got a guy, he keeps throwing one out there to me. So just so you know, our next episode will be a short, but it will be what if the Giant debuted in 1995 in the WWF. It's coming, folks. So drop a comment below, like, subscribe, share, let everybody know. You show us some love, people. But at the end of the day, never forget that the card is always subject to change.